Good evening and welcome to the special meeting of the Methacton School Board. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before I take, let me do the announcements of the executive session. The board met in executive session following last month's board meeting on July 23rd, immediately following the board meeting at the high school and during which we discussed teacher negotiations. We also met just prior to this meeting where we discussed a personnel item. Okay, now we can move on to attendance. Before I take attendance, I need a motion to approve the telephoning in of one board member for the purpose of voting on the appointment of the new superintendent. So do I have a motion? Kim, do I have a second?
Yes.
Jim Phillips, all in favor? 8-1. Okay, we can call Christian.
This is Christian.
Hi, Christian.
Hi, Christian.
You are on the air.
How is everybody?
We're all fine.
Very good,
Tremendous.
Thank you. Okay, so present this evening are, let me see, 6 board members. Howard Jones is absent this evening, and we have Christian Nascimento attending by the phone.
7 board.
We have 7 board
Seven.
We have
members.
7 here,
You have to
7,
count
8,
yourself.
9, okay. Doing math. Okay, so normally at this time, what I would do is call for public comment on the one item that we're voting on at this special meeting. I'm going to hold off on that this evening until after I've read a statement describing the process that was followed to find our new superintendent. At that time, after that, I will ask for public comment, then I'll ask for the motion, a second, we'll hear from the board, and then we'll vote. The purpose of this special meeting is to approve the appointment of a new superintendent for the Methacton School District. The process began back in April when we requested information from several search firms. The board interviewed 3 firms on May 13th and selected to use the services provided by the Pennsylvania School Board Association. PSBA began their search immediately by posting the position through a series of venues inside and outside of Pennsylvania. On June 20th, an entire day was spent meeting with focus groups to develop a profile of characteristics that our next superintendent should possess. The groups represented administrators, teachers, support staff, and the community. While the leaders of each group's bargaining unit selected their participants, the board selected the community group. Each school's home and school association was asked to send 1 person. 3 past board presidents and current school board candidates were also asked to participate. On June 26th, the results of those meetings were shared with the board and a final profile was decided upon. On July 9th, the board received 26 resumes from individuals interested in the position. We had a little over a week to review and evaluate each resume individually, and we met again on July 18th to review and discuss as a group. At that time, we reduced the group down to 9 individuals and set up interviews for the Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday of the following week. At the end of the week, the board decided to bring 2 candidates back for second interviews. On August 7th, those 2 individuals spent a very long, grueling day being interviewed by a student group, administrator group, teacher group, support staff group, community group, and then again the board. The board discussed the 2 candidates and was given a brief report on the focus group results. In addition, PSBA provided the board with a report of extensive background checks they had performed on both candidates. The following day, we were provided with a written report on the focus group's remarks, and we met yet again on August 20th for our final discussion. It is my belief that the board could not have been any more diligent than we were. There was much discussion, and given that we are 9 individuals with 9 differing points of view, it's not surprising that reaching a consensus was no small task. It is my firm belief, however, that this evening we will be appointing the very best individual for the position of superintendent. So at this time, I will ask for public comment on the one item we'll be voting on. No comments? Really? Okay, thanks, Mr. Andrews. I was getting nervous.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I'd just like to comment that I thought the process detailing was very informative, and I think getting from 26 down to 1 is quite a task, and hopefully we'll all like the results. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, then let me find the actual motion. Do I have a motion to approve the employment of Dr. David A. Zerby as superintendent under the terms and conditions as set forth in the employment agreement at a salary of $170,000 a year, effective on or before October 20th, 2013 through June 30th, 2017? Mr. O'Neill. Do I have a second? Mr. Ruff.
Second.
Thanks, Christian. Do I have any comments from the board?
I have a comment. There were two completely different candidates that the school board chose for final interviews. Different experience levels from different school environments and different personalities. No wonder we could not all agree on the same candidate. Even the focus group seemed to be split. However, this is one of the most important decisions the school board has to make in choosing the person who will lead the Methacton School District. So I was disappointed in how the selection process was handled. I wish Dr. Zerby success here at Methacton, and I'm sure that the school board and the staff here at Methacton will support him to the fullest.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments?
Christian?
Christian?
You said
Christian,
no.
we didn't catch that.
You said no comments.
Oh, he said no comment. Okay. Never mind.
Okay. And I'm going to do...
I just said I didn't have any comments at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to do a roll call vote. We're going to start with Mr. O'Neill.
Do I say Dr. Zerby or yes when I say?
Yes, whatever.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Roth?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Barone?
While I will support the elected superintendent of the school district, I vote no because I would have preferred a more extensive search.
Thank you. Mrs. Woodring?
Yes.
Mrs. Shackelford?
No.
Mr. Nascimento? Mr. Nascimento?
Absolutely, I vote yes.
And I vote yes. Motion carries, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 2.
6-2.
6-2. Sorry.
6-2.
Congratulations. I have just a little more to read here. Just want to give you a little background on our new superintendent. Dr. Zerby has served as an assistant superintendent in the Pocono Mountain School District in Swiftwater, Pennsylvania since 2008. Prior to that, he served the Pocono Mountain School District as Executive Director of Technology. Dr. Zerby has also held other administrative positions at both the Schuylkill Intermediate Unit as Supervisor of Educational Services and Technology and at Schuylkill County Area Vocational Technical School as a Building Administrator. His background includes extensive experience with all areas of school administration. He has leadership experience at the Vocational, Intermediate Unit, and the school district levels. Dr. Zerby began his career as a program instructor at the Schuylkill County AVTS in 1993. Dr. Zerby obtained his doctorate in educational leadership from Nova Southeastern University. He obtained principal's and superintendent certifications from Temple University, along with his master's degree in education administration. He holds a bachelor's of psychology with secondary social studies certification from Lycoming College. It is my extreme pleasure to introduce you to our new superintendent, Dr. David Zerby.
My family and I are My family and I are extremely pleased with this opportunity to become a member of the Methacton community. I can tell you that with this honor, I'm humbled, I'm excited, and I'm certainly ready and prepared to
Take a break.
There you go.
Those frogs are a pain, aren't they?
I'm certainly humbled and prepared to take the duties and responsibilities of this position and help lead the Methacton School District to be the best it can be, and to work diligently for you in an effective and efficient manner as your next superintendent of schools. Thank you very much, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Introduce us to the best part of your family.
I'd like to introduce you to my wife, Christine. If you would just stand. My oldest daughter, Tiffany. My middle daughter, Jillian. And my youngest daughter, Sydney.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're just going to adjourn, take a couple-minute break, and then we'll reconvene with our regular work session.
Been smiling.
Okay, so we'll reconvene with the work session. The only thing that's changed here is the attendance. We no longer have Christian, so we have Howard, Jones, and Christian not attending, and all other board members are in attendance. Don't believe we have any scheduled speakers.
Did we mention recording?
I could do that now. Yeah, the meeting, the special meeting has been recorded and will be broadcast on our email.
On the website.
On the website, I'm sorry. And, because I don't believe we have time enough to get that onto
No.
the...
Can we get it on the channel?
Tonight or tomorrow morning? You can get it up by mid-morning.
That would be fine. So we can get it up on both. Get it on the website and...
Well, the website by morning.
Yep,
Okay.
that'll work.
All right, so we're going to move on to, we have no voting items. We're going to move on to non-voting items where we are going to be having a discussion on several policies. Do you want to start, Maria, as chairman of the policy committee?
Just for background, this project came about when the policy committee was asked to review the board policies and recommend policies that needed improvement. Of the 15 policies we reviewed, 9 policies were reviewed, changes were made, were applicable, and approved at a second reading. The remaining 6 policies are on the agenda tonight for discussion. The committee has put together some concepts on these policies and would like to open it up to discussion, beginning with policy 011, which is board governance standards / code of conduct. I hope all board members realize that this is about the district and what is best for Methacton, and everyone has received copies, so I'm hoping that we will have some lively and good discussion. I said and I'm not sure how we want to start or go about it. The first one, like I said, is local board procedures, which is 011.
Just so you're aware that the committee's comments that came out of the committees are in black. I added my comments in red, so if you're wondering what the red is, that's my comments. Those didn't come from the committee. I added them later.
Do you want to read the policy in the actual practice?
Do I want to read the policy?
No, I just mean the summary. I mean, here. No, it's one sentence. No, I don't, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Which one are we doing first, please?
011.
1-1.
Board governance standards / code of conduct. Policies set standards and procedures to be followed by school board members to promote student growth and achievement. The actual practice, the board has been practically following the standards set forth in this policy. Section D and E compliance may be particularly questionable. The board recommendations, or the committee, I should say, recommendations, is the board needs to reach out to our stakeholders and seek their input on issues facing the board, Quarterly coffees could be started and stakeholders encouraged to attend. Board members should be able to take advantage of the expertise our community members have to offer. Professional development plans for board members should be discussed during a work session each January. Meet with the new superintendent to review this policy in depth and move forward to full implementation. For the board to fully comply with this policy, it needs to arrive at and agree upon a set of annual goals and objectives along with a long-term vision sufficient to guide all stakeholders and move the district ahead. Likewise, the board should establish expectations of itself in order to measure its success. And what Dr. Miller has added, which I think is a great idea, that we should conduct a yearly self-evaluation of its work as a board and its progress toward meeting its goals, and that we think that PSBA has a process that the board can use to do this. So, I'll open that up. Anybody have any discussions, questions?
I like the addition.
Huh?
I like the addition, the self-evaluation annual check. I think it's a good idea.
I think it's a good thing, and I think PSBA has a pretty straightforward process. It's not a time-consuming process for doing it, and I think it gives you a sense of where you're going and whether you're meeting your goals. I think it'd be a good thing to do.
Yeah, my only thing is to make sure that process is, complete and effective while not chewing up a lot of the board's
Right,
time. 'Cause
yeah.
I mean,
It
it's
doesn't
one of
take a
the
lot of
things.
time, as I recall. It doesn't take up a lot of time. It's pretty straightforward. Once you develop your goals, it's pretty straightforward. It has a midterm progress report and a final report.
The only problem I have, is last sentence for is whether believing the PSBA has a process that we could do this. I mean, there's other processes out there, and it's,
Absolutely.
and I,
You don't have to use theirs. I just happen to know they have one, and you could take that and
right.
revise it and make it fit your needs too, but you should find a process to do that, I think.
Are we good? I would very much like to see a formal board's goal-setting session occur every summer. This summer may have been extremely difficult to do. We could barely get everybody out for the superintendent, which is, I think, the most important thing we do, and then to ask you to come to another, I wasn't going to send out an email asking you to come to another meeting, so. But at this retreat, we should be able to set our goals and schedule dates on which we will meet quarterly to specifically review our process, our progress. As the 10th board member, our superintendent should be very much involved in this process, and he and the board president developing each meeting's content. As a suggestion, at the end of each school year, we could hold a town hall meeting whereby the community is invited to comment on and suggest areas on which they would like to see the board focus. Also at this meeting, we could report on our accomplishments from the recently ended school year. An additional similar type meeting could be held in the fall to report on our summer goal setting session, and also invite comment or suggest action steps that we could employ to achieve our goals. So I very much like the idea of including the community in helping us, tell us what they would like to see, help us set our goals, and then report back to them our results. So we're accountable.
Well, I like that idea. I do not like the idea of having it during the summer. I just think it's too difficult to get a board together for such an
Okay.
important meeting. Another food for thought there, if you hold something like that in January, you are then positioning that meeting to be, you're setting your goals. When new board members come on board in December, they've only been on there a month, but this would be also a very good time for them to see how the board would function and what kind of goals and things that it would be to anticipate.
I just suggested summer because that kind of goes in schedule with
With the school,
the
with
start
the
of
school,
the school year.
yeah, but I'm thinking of more in logistics with getting the board together.
Yeah.
Because it's really, that goal session is, you got to have everybody there.
Absolutely.
And in summertime, it's just so difficult for everybody to do stuff with. I mean, nobody knows what their, major plans are going to be next summer, and you pick a date, and invariably, somebody's going to be away. You have 10 members of a board, so. But other than that, I think it's a great idea, and I like the idea of having the quarterly coffees, something more informal. I like the ideas of having, like a roundtable discussion, I think you said with the public.
Town hall.
Town hall meeting. Yep, I think that's a very good idea.
Any other comments on these? Okay.
Okay. We'll put something together
Okay.
on that. The next one that I'd like to look at is policy 012, which is civility. This policy is designed to promote an environment in which all members of the school community will be treated with respect. Actual practice is the board has not been following this policy as some rude and disrespectful behavior by board members occurs, leaving members of the audience, often district staff and public, to believe that standard is acceptable. Recommendations. First and foremost, the board should review this policy in conjunction with Board Policy 0011 to determine whether there is duplication and or overlap of language expectations. A review of 6 neighboring school districts revealed no civility policy, with one exception, Upper Merion, listed a civility policy referencing a connection to its strategic plan. Board members and other members of the school community are expected to be role models even in the most difficult of circumstances and communicate with each other in an atmosphere of professionalism and mutual respect. It is the board's position that disrespect should be confronted and addressed when it occurs. A member of the board should be given the responsibility of enforcing this policy. Dr. Miller's comments. This policy should be retained. Although the board has not been following the policy or has not been enforcing the policy, the very fact that the committee feels that rude and disrespectful behavior has occurred is reason enough to keep it and to be on record that civil discourse is desired. Each incident should be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, with someone being responsible for the enforcement. Comments?
I have comments.
We figured. Go ahead.
I'm prepared. You told me to prepare, so I did.
That's right.
First off, under actual practice, I think the first sentence, the board has not been following the policy as rude and disrespectful behavior by the board occurs, I agree with. However, the remainder of that sentence, leading members of the audience and public to believe that standard is acceptable, is not actual practice. It's actually an opinion, and I don't think should be under actual practice. Also, in bullet number 3, it stated it's the board's position that disrespect should be confronted. And while I agree that disrespect should not be tolerated, I have no recollection of the board formally taking a position on this. So I think that's stated incorrectly as well. So these appear to me as to be personal opinions under actual practice, and they're recommendations, just that. It's not actual practice. The dealing of inappropriate conduct of board members, whether at a public meeting or a closed session meeting, is the purview of the president as presiding officer. If it's the board's decision to address each incident as it happens, then they must allow and support the president in that endeavor. Otherwise, I have no problem with this.
And just so you're aware that my comment where it said someone should be being responsible for the enforcement, I would typically agree with Joyce that that person should be the president. That's part of the president's function. If there's something going on between board members, the president should deal with it.
Everybody agree with that? Any other comments?
I don't have anything.
Can I ask a question too about the, in fact, I meant to ask it at the beginning. The preparation of of this actual paperwork, was this a consensus of the entire policy committee?
Well, I forwarded all of this to Kim and to Jim and asked for their
And me.
comments.
And I got it.
And to Dr. Miller. I only received anything back from Kim and Dr. Miller, so it
Okay.
is not from the entire policy committee.
Okay.
But a lot of this was discussed. I mean, these kinds of things were discussed
At a policy meeting?
Yeah, the
Okay.
committee meeting. I don't know that all of the specific things were discussed, but a lot of the general stuff was discussed about
Right, but the policy committee consisted of Kim and I. Thank you.
Well, it doesn't. It also consists of Jen.
Well, right, but,
Depends on what time of day.
Well,
it depends.
he's a member of the
That-
committee
that goes-
regardless. He's a member of the committee.
He is.
You know, depends where you work or not.
All right, okay, so let's go back to this. I do take offense to that statement, Jim. I think the reason we need this is because and let's go right to what you just brought up. If this is a committee and it has 3 people on it, and whatever time it's set, it's been set on our calendar for a year, right? We set it in the beginning of the year. Whatever our committees and our policies are, if somebody doesn't do their part of that job on the committee, then that falls on that person. That doesn't fall on the committee or the board, because the board's counting on those people to do their part of that.
Absolutely.
Right, am I right? So I kind of think those kind of comments going back and forth is exactly what this should be about. That can't happen. That person's responsibility is to do that part of the job.
Well, you know, I was going to mention this later.
Regardless of what committee we're talking about.
And if you find that you can't do your job on the committee, then you should resign and we should fill it with somebody else.
Absolutely, right.
However, that being said, all of our other committees are committees of the whole. All other board committee means where the board runs the committee and not where we're a member on a committee run by personnel, by district personnel. It's held in the evening. And
Well, that might be true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that has to be done all the time. In the very beginning of the year, last year,
I think we were trying to be consistent.
That was set a year ago when we set our appointment times. Just like there was a change in location for this place, and some people like it and some people don't, and that's okay. That was set a year ago on the public calendar so that everybody could see it. So that's the same as this.
Well, I don't ever remember voting on what time the policy committee was going to be held. I thought that was a vote that was held by the...
It's been on for a year, it's been on, and
And I'm
last
not,
year. That's
and I'm not,
Let
I
me
don't have a
remind
problem
you.
with that, but what I do have a problem with going forward is all of the board committees that we have that are run by the board are committees of the whole, with the exception of the policy committee. And I think that we should fix that and have that also be a committee of the whole, where the entire board is part.
How would you do that?
Just like we do finance, just like we do...
And I'll tell you, there will be no policies approved.
It's going to be a little
It will
more
be
difficult.
extremely different. There's a difference when you have a technology meeting, and when you have a finance meeting, and when you have a property meeting. Nobody on the board gets up and gives that. You have those people who are responsible giving those and telling you what is up. When we have a policy meeting, we may have 5, 6, 7 policies to look at. We sit there, we review them ahead of time, so we go in, we know what the policies are, and we discuss them. So if you all want to sit there at this meeting and listen to, the new superintendent, and Kim and I and Jim talk about them and discuss them.
I do, but I can't make the 9 o'clock meeting.
As long as I've been on the board, and even on my very first day when I was, asked to serve on a committee, the one thing that I believe it was Dan Sattler said, he said, okay, what days are you able to make a meeting? This is what we've done in the past. Can you do that? And I thought it was always incumbent upon the committee. And back then, technology was done. We met in the morning because it just happened that 6:30 in the morning worked great for all of us. So that's when we decided to meet. But I think it sounds like a more of a logistical meeting time that needs to be ironed out. And granted, it's been published for for a year or whatever. But I think the whole point of it is that the committee members need to all agree on a meeting time that's convenient that they all can make. Number one. Number two. I don't agree that this should be a committee of the whole because, for Maria's sake, policy is a different animal and that there's so many things to cover and so many different things to go over. And I think Maria's been doing a great job on this committee too. I think the committee has done so much work on policy in just this short time that you guys have been doing it. I mean, more so than the past 4 years and when I've been on the board. So I think it's working well, and I think it'll stay well. Now, if you guys need to come up with a different time to meet so that everybody can meet at a time, maybe you ought to consider that. But other than that,
Here's the thing. Prior to them being held in the morning, it was always held before or after our regular board meetings, just as a technology meeting, finance committee, property committee. The committee holds their meeting. If other board members want to show up early or stay late to attend the meeting, so be it. But time is not as flexible for some people when they work, when they have other commitments, family, etc. It's better to consolidate all your meetings on one day or 2 days during the month than 3, 4 in the morning, in the afternoon. It doesn't, we volunteer to do this. It's not like it's a great pay raise to be on a committee, and you don't get paid as a board member. So, I mean, you're free. This is your free time away that you take away from your family, friends, work. So prior to this past year, it was never a problem attending any of the policy committee meetings. When this was all set up, I said I had a problem with it, 9 o'clock in the morning. I said, what about 7? Couldn't do that. We don't get up that early. So therefore, I tried. I also tried to get it during, before, or after our regular meetings, and that was on deaf ears also. So this goes back to this committee. All the committees should be held on a board night, whether it's before, after, or during a board meeting. That way, everybody has a schedule, they know where they're going. I've also expressed my problem with having our meetings here rather than the board room. Our email, our board update, the agenda says for tonight, says the high school. Here we are. It's about consistency, and that people know that when they show up for a board meeting, first of all, where the place is. Second, if you have an executive session, you know exactly what room you're going to. So it's just being consistent. That way, everybody knows when to show up and what they have to do. But having a schedule and going to a chart and saying, oh, well, let's see, I'm on this committee, this is on this day. You know what? Between work schedule, meetings with that, with kids' sports, family events, vacations, etc., how can you make all the meetings, let alone some of them? So this is something that I've been talking about for years about board procedure, that we have to have a public meeting about board procedure, how we want to handle board functions, when we want to announce our executive sessions, when we want to announce different committees, just when we're doing everything. And I think coming into this with Dr. Zerbe, this is going to be a great time to start this conversation and start structuring the board so it's consistent, professional, and works well. And that's all I've asked for the last several years, and here we are still, so.
Well, you did bring up the having our work sessions at the high school, and you know the reason why we started here, because we wanted to be at a table. And we did discuss how somehow we can configure the tables that are there to be conducive to what we want to take place. So, and I agree, if we can make it one place, but I agree with you in consistency. It makes it easier, and makes it easier for the board members, and it makes it easier for the community.
Yeah.
Well, I have maybe some perspective to add to this. First of all, I think when we have the meetings at the Farina building, a lot of these policies overlap. So when we go down the list and we look at policy 1, we find out that it's attached or referenced to another policy, and suddenly we need the expertise maybe of Stuart, or we have to run over to Mr. Harney and ask about something. So I'm not in agreement that this is just like a technology meeting or it's like a finance meeting. It's not like that. Policies cross into all different areas. We've got one monster policy that we put off and put off. That's school-related organizations. I can't even begin to tell you how many different policies that bleeds into. So point number 1. Point number 2 is that this is basically a paper review. And so essentially we could consider not having any meeting and just reading the policies and sending in your comments. It's a paper review. So point number 2.
That's not a bad idea.
there's more than one way to skin this kitty here. And so I would not be in favor of piling it on to yet another board meeting. When you start meetings at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you go that long, people run out of steam. And I don't have a job all day, but I do take offense to the fact that people may think I sit around and pop bonbons all day. That's not the case. So let's be respectful of other people's time and responsibilities as well.
You had an interesting point, being in a paper, review, basically. And you could, circulate them through and have markups done up on them and then have them go back to the policy chair.
Policy is not, I say this from the government perspective and working with policy is not the most riveting topic that you're going to find. And so it's tedious, it is very detailed. I noticed just in what we've put together here, there's a little punctuation error that we made. And it takes, some sort of focus and commitment and a keen eye to get through some of this stuff.
I have a question. If you were to do something like that, you know how we go through our regular meetings and you have policy reading, first read, second read and all that. Wouldn't that be a natural time where the committee could say, okay guys, we have policy 012 here. We need to talk about this. We've come up with this, this, and this, and we need your input.
We do what we're doing right now.
Well,
essentially,
let me tell you,
but we need to do more of it.
This is how it used to be done. When I was here before, that's how we did. We had a policy committee that almost never met. The policies were done electronically, pretty much. They got sent out, marked up, sent back, we made revisions, and then when it came up to first reading is where it was discussed.
And we never talk about it.
Well,
and then that second reading, it was there for a vote. So we did that before. We didn't have a policy committee that met as regularly as this one does now. And the only thing I would say about before the board meeting, I understand the motivation. It would be better because lots more people could come. But the policy committee, you couldn't get done what we get done in 45 minutes.
No, and
a longer time.
And I will say, in our policy meetings, when they were held before and after, it was just the policy committee and the superintendent at the time. The other thing is the ability that the public can attend, the press can attend. Some of the policies that we worked on over the time were dealt with athletes, as far as alcohol, whether it's on property, off property, on a weekend. And here's a situation that, okay, are we singling out one group over another? Does it apply to mathletes and the quarterback of the football team? If there's a picture of the guy at a party on a Saturday and he's drinking, well, how's our policy affect him? Well, at the time, it was to remove the kid from sports. Well, if the mathlete, and I don't mean to pick out the mathlete, but the mathlete, if it's the same situation, well, that doesn't affect, he doesn't get yanked off the team for being for a mathlete. So, but this policy was one that, hey, the students should know about it, and the parents might want to know about, the staff, and some input there, because some people felt that, well, if they do something, even though it's during the summer, we should be pulling them off the football team. So things like that are better.
Some management stuff here too, that the board sets the policy and then they.
But this particular policy was dealing with that. But that's something where if it's at 9 o'clock in the morning and you're a parent or the press or, nobody knows to look for the schedule on the policy. But if they happen to say, well, I'm going to the meeting tonight, and they're sitting out in the audience like they are today, and they see there's a policy meeting after the regular meeting, and there's these type items on the list, they might want to stay. And it allows them to see how we work and to have some input. But that's where we need.
Can we do this? Can we ask the policy committee, online, in person, in paper, however, to come up with some kind of plan, some kind of procedure that along the lines that you suggested? We're having it maybe You don't even have to meet in person, or
And-
you could do it through email, it gets out to the board, we get our responses back to the policy committee meeting, and then we discuss it here at a work session.
Well, here's the one thing, as far as the committee doing it electronically through email, whether they meet at 9 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock at night, there should be minutes of the meeting, okay? And, well, you know, and this is something that.
There
hey,
are minutes of the meeting that are
And-
posted
and-
at the board meetings.
Hold on a second, I have the floor right now,
Okay.
okay?
But, you know,
I have the
we
floor
have
right
had a
now.
meeting at 5 o'clock. We
I
had-
have the floor right
Yeah,
now.
go ahead. Okay. You've had.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I know.
We should also,
Make my
whether
civility
it's
policy.
videotaping the committee meeting, audio taping it, but there should be a record where the board members can fully understand what the conversations were that were going back, the highlights, the downside of things. But if we're gonna, let's do it right. And
Well, then maybe it's just a matter of language, and maybe we put out in some sort of way publicly that there will be a policy review that's due as a matter of whatever, litigation, legislation, cyclic, whatever, and then the public would also know that that policy is under review, and we would take comment. I mean, that's like a Federal Register almost.
Well, and the proposed changes, it could be posted online under the policy committee, and I mean, you can keep the public following along with you as you're doing it.
Yeah, and the policies are sent out to the board the committee people, and before we meet, and ask for their comments. And we sure can send them out to everybody. That's no problem. I'll just have Donna forward them to everybody. And now she just sends them to the three of us.
Yeah,
And,
could
we
you
can
guys
put
do
something
something, put something together
Yeah,
so
that's
that we
fine.
can maybe change the whole way that we do business around policy?
And we'll see how-
Where were we?
See how it works.
Okay. Next policy.
The next policy is censure. This is an interesting policy. The current policy is, this policy and procedure is intended to provide the mechanism by which the Methacton School District Board of, this Methacton School District Board of School Directors, acting as a whole, can discipline any of its members who violate local, state, federal laws and regulations and Methacton School District policies. This policy was adopted in June 27th of 2006 and has never been updated. Since the current policy committee members have been in place, this policy has hung in suspension because we weren't quite sure what to do with it. We all sign the PSBA Code of Conduct for members of Pennsylvania School Board. So I guess what we're wondering is if censure, do we have any right? I mean, is there anything that we could do to be held responsible to censure somebody? And should it be eliminated? And do we just use the PSBA Code of Conduct? Which is the question.
Well, I guess the big part is what leads up to the censure, the procedure. And if it's...
There's an investigation procedure built into the policy.
So if it's something that you go to the board member and say, well, knock it off, okay, they don't do it, then what's the next step? Okay, formally written, whatever. If that's procedure and then it gets to censure, and they have opportunities to stop with the cease and desist what they're doing before they get censured, I don't see a problem having the censure policy in there. If it was something that the procedure was, well, this someone makes a vote and they get censured, that's where you have a problem with it. As far as the censure policy in itself, I think it's needed in the sense that if we're doing where we're hiring or firing someone, if people are going to the press and possibly adversely, not even possibly, but if they actually adversely affect something. If we're trying to hire someone and they go to the press and then it gets out and that person no longer wants the position, I think there's a prime opportunity that that person should be censured, especially if board members have gone through a process and saying, look, nobody here, stop going to the press, whoever it may be, or if we do know who it is, we tell them, curb your comments because we don't want to lose this. Yes, you're one of 9, and that's something that when they keep doing what they do and you lose that opportunity to hire the person, I think that's where the censorship, where someone should be censored.
I think one of the concerns about that, and Frank can probably speak to this more than I can, but one of the concerns with is just that you're dealing with some free speech issues, some First Amendment issues here, and I think if someone violates a policy, that's different. Then I think this may be the remedy. If they violate federal laws and regulations, I think there are other remedies that could be worked out. But just something, for instance, like you're talking about, I think treads on First Amendment rights, and I don't think censure is appropriate because it's a First Amendment right.
And the other thing is, what is the harm leaving the policy? I mean, if it's a high benchmark to censure somebody and not violate their First Amendment rights.
I think the benchmark would need to be pretty high, but you're right. I don't know.
And we do have legal representation. Yes. I think that's something that our attorney would tell us.
And could advise you at that point, but.
Well, let me try and do that now. Okay.
Great.
The problem that I have with the censure policy is this. There's nothing in the school code that provides for any type of a censure policy. And really what it is an expression of opinion of the majority of the board. There are some things that are left better to the public and the board members maybe outside of this room, and that's really what elections are all about. If someone is in here and they're behaving in a fashion that 5 of you don't like, you'll find out whether that behavior is appropriate within a certain amount of time when they come up for re-election. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not talking about disruptive behavior in the meeting or anything like that, because that, as Dr. Miller's indicated, is part of another policy, and that's not what I'm talking about. But on those times when you just don't like what somebody's doing because of what they're saying or what they're doing, there would be a natural tendency to move toward this and say, we don't like what I'm talking to Jim's doing. Let's do something by way of censure. And then it happens. Your response will be, well, I'm perfectly entitled, and you're then going to go out there and you're going to talk about it in the public. What you've done is sort of elevated the issue beyond whatever the subject matter is within the board. And I don't like to see policies that cause more disruption than they cure. And to attempt to censure someone in a meeting like this creates an adversarial situation immediately. Now, sometimes you need to have that adversarial situation, but this is the creation of one when you might not need to do that. And so I would tread lightly before.
And there might be another way to handle that
this.
if somebody
Sure.
violates policy. Even a resolution of the board could be done for such a thing. So I think there are other ways to handle it. I just worry that it's too easy to tread over that line, the tyranny of the majority kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, and this censure policy was used. In fact, it was used in 2008. I was a new board member, and I was chairman of the censure committee. One board member wanted to censure another board member. We formed a committee. I worked very closely with Chuck Sweet at the time, helped me through it. It was never made public, but it was first off made very clear that the behavior was not appreciated, and we got over it. We talked about it, and we got it behind us. It never went into the public. I don't want this policy to ever bring it to the public. I think there's some things that happen within a board. You've got 9 different people with strong opinions, and sometimes You just don't always mesh. But if you deal with it and get beyond it, I think that's what the real purpose of the censure policy is. And also, I think it detours some board members from aberrant behavior. Well, I don't want to be censured.
It was used back in 2006 as well.
Mm-hmm. And I have all the paperwork because I didn't know what to do with it. So I have it in a file, and so to address something else that was put here, I think maybe the superintendent's office should keep a file of things like this, so that when I'm long gone off board, it's not sitting in my file cabinet that nobody knows about.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if that's not addressed in here, you know what to do.
Well, she had touched, Kim had touched on it.
Yeah, I mean, we as a policy committee tossed it around. I think our input was from Dr. Miller. But, you know, the whole idea of keeping it out of the public's sort of specter, I mean, if the subject chooses to have a public hearing, then they
do that. Yeah, sure.
So, to me, it seems like a whole lot of process going nowhere and a whole lot of work for reasons that could get legal. If I feel like I'm in my full right to have an opinion, I don't care if the rest of the board likes it or not.
But it would have to go beyond that, but an opinion is
It would have to be a violation of
yeah.
policy, I think, it would have to be.
Well, can I ask, what is the consequence of it? I mean, if we do that, let's say we keep it, we don't keep it, whatever we do with it, what happens to the person? You just have to
It's
talk
not
into it?
necessarily, the issue isn't necessarily, in my opinion, the consequence. It's just that it's out there and it's a mechanism that we could use. And sometimes I think it's a mechanism we can use to get it on the table, talk about it, and be done with it. Instead of having it just hanging over, this person was never talked to, and have it just blossom into something we don't want it to. So
Well,
that's what I
then
see.
going back to the other policy, if the president's role is to keep people in line, then why wouldn't that apply to that situation?
Because the censure is a behavior that not necessarily would be not necessarily take place at a meeting, but maybe something that they did outside of the meeting, but still
affects the board.
Yeah.
I guess I don't see the distinction there. If there's an issue, whether it's a public
Well, if we had an
forum,
executive session and you called the Times Herald and told them what we said, something like that. I couldn't curtail that at a meeting because it didn't happen at a meeting. Behavior like that.
I guess I still don't really see the difference.
But it also, you know, even depending on what the content, what the board member says, the board member is elected official. I mean, and I think that's what Frank's getting at is, they're elected, the public will choose, and that's the ultimate judge in the whole thing. As far as a board member going from an executive session and saying something, there's not much that can happen unless, you know,
Unless
it's
it was confidential information about
personnel, students,
yes.
and stuff like that, and then you're gonna have to worry about the civil action.
That's right.
And that's the equalizer
And
there.
that's outside of us here.
But as far as us, whether we like what someone says to the press or to whomever, they're an elected official and they're constituents. So, I mean, I've always felt that was the best way of handling things. I mean, I'm torn with the censure end, you know, one way or another. I mean, because they can't remove you from office. And
there's no real penalty.
right.
I think there's
That's just a modern
there's
day
certainly some thin
lashing.
ice here, and it really, it's a cumbersome process, and it's thin ice, and I think that's why it's been hanging there. I'm not sure there aren't other ways to deal with aberrant behavior, if you want to call it that. I'm not sure there aren't other ways to deal with it outside of this, with that.
Frank, you have some
Just a-
suggestions on this
Well,
that you can get to us?
yeah, let me just, and I'll be happy to do that, but I just want to focus on one thing in the procedure, because if anybody were to be censored by the board and subsequently appeal that and be asked for a public hearing, my first question is, what are we having a hearing about? Because the having a hearing comes out of the constitutional protection of notice and opportunity to be heard. And that is afforded when you are attempting to deprive someone of a right that they have. in this circumstance, you'd have 5 people expressing an opinion that board member A just didn't behave properly. There's no deprivation of a right at all, and now this person is asking for a hearing on what? On 5 subjective opinions with
Who didn't
no,
like that board member's subjective opinion.
with no remedy. So now we're having a hearing on essentially nothing.
Yeah.
So that's part of my problem with this policy. It's a remedy for a problem that needs to be remedied elsewhere.
So you can help us out with something?
Sure.
Yeah, we need help on this one.
So we can move on?
Frank and I can talk a little bit.
Alright.
I think there'll be some
Thank you.
things we can come up with outside of this.
The next policy is 6.1, broadcasting board meetings. I think the board talked about this and said that we were going to broadcast the work sessions. The other thing, I guess, that had been suggested by some of the people at our our policy meeting, actually, was if we could also tape and broadcast the technology, finance, and property committee meetings. Comments?
Well, I think because of all the board committees come back at the regular board meeting and make the report is included in the board meeting tape. So I personally don't think it's necessary, but I do think we should be taping, well, we are taping and record and broadcasting our work sessions.
Yeah,
There's a lot of conversation that takes place here
I
that,
think all full board meetings ought to be broadcast, work sessions and regular meetings and special meetings. The committee meetings, even when they're committees of the whole, it's not always the whole board, and really, they're just discussions that lead to recommendations, which are then discussed by the board. So I think at some point that all gets discussed. I think because committees come into being, go out of being, people come on them, go off them, it's probably better to broadcast all of the regular meetings and let the discussion occur at the committee meetings and be reported on. That's my feeling.
Well, as far as whether it's audio or video or both, archiving them, I don't have a problem with archiving. As far as broadcasting them, I don't think it's necessary because they get the gist of it but if someone wanted to go back and look at what was said and how things came about, I think it's not a problem to archive. I mean, CDs and that technology is getting obsolete, but it doesn't take up much space on the shelf.
we're taping them anyway,
Yeah.
but I don't think we need to broadcast them.
Do we all agree on that? Go ahead, Mark.
No, I agree with Dr. Miller, and I'd also add just logistical differences to it as well. I mean, there's a 9 a.m. meeting. I was at one of the 6 a.m. Technology meetings over breakfast one day, so I don't know if you want to bring your camera with you next time. So logistically, there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to do the committee meetings as well, so.
Okay. Thank you. The next one I'm going to have Kim handle because this is her baby. It's policy 004.1, which is student board membership.
All right, yeah, I had asked Maria if I could handle this one. This, because it directly involves the students, I certainly take a liking to this stuff. Here's an opportunity for us, I think, to maybe take a look at what's already a good program and see if we can't stretch or grow in a different direction. To have students participate in what I would classify as civic sort of duty, civic responsibility, I think is a wonderful sort of experiential learning opportunity. We took a look at the selection process. We have had the benefit of top-notch, high-performing, academically successful students with us. So I guess in concept, it's no more than maybe a sit-down with the superintendent, maybe with some high school staff, some counselors, principal, and just seeing if we could maybe make this a more meaningful experience for these kids. It's we give them an M award. They're still service projects. Maybe if we looked at adding some meat to this, that it could be one of their senior projects. There may be some students out there who, while they might not be across the board superior performers academically, but they may have a passion for civics or history or, just focused on service. So that was probably the summary that, here's a program that maybe we could grow and stretch and provide some other students an opportunity to build a resume, or even do one of their college application essays.
I think my comments pretty much agree with that kind of thing. I think that the process probably could stand a little more oversight, the selection process could stand a little more oversight from the superintendent's office to make sure it's organized properly. But I agree, I think they could, I've been in other places where student representatives were a little more active in taking part in discussions, or as appropriate. I think it's needs to be done carefully. There are certain things that you would like them to weigh in on, and they should know about that ahead of time so they could gather some data for you and some information and report to the board on how the student body feels about certain things. So I think there are ways to do that, but it probably takes, and I think the concept of a mentor for the student, somebody on the board or the superintendent. I've always used the curriculum person of the district to work with those people to kind of give them heads up about what's coming and what the board might like to hear from them on, and then it organizes it that way so that they, while it's important for them to report what's going on in the high school and it's nice to hear all that stuff, there's also some things that they could feed back to you that are a little more meat that you would like to hear from the student body. So
I would
there's a way to
volunteer
do
for
that.
this. I would love to do this if my service is needed. I would love this.
I mean, there are ways to do that, and it's probably not every month that you need to hear from, but when particular topics come up that would be interesting to know how the students feel, then you can, if you give them enough time, they can organize that. You need some good kids to do that, but they'll do that for you.
Well, I'd like to see it tied in with our U.S. government class. We have AP, we have honors, we have regular U.S. government. That would be perfect.
You mean have them
somehow have those teachers, those students
rotate in and out?
in that. Yeah, I mean, well, I think
Yeah, well, the
that'd be
kids
great,
serve
but I
for
don't
2
know how
years,
long.
so.
Yeah. I don't think we should mess with the process too much of the board. I think if the process is changed, it should definitely come from the superintendent.
Yeah, I think the process is okay. I
Yeah.
just think it needs to be tightened up a little bit so we.
And then once
Doesn't
we
become
do
a
get that
last-minute
student,
kind of
and
thing.
then I think that's where our point, I think there should be an orientation. We've had students that have said things probably they shouldn't have. They didn't know that, the superintendent doesn't like surprises. We all know that, we were told that, and so that we need to do some kind of orientation. And then, and then a mentor, I think that's a great idea. Maybe give them a heads up as to what we're talking about, have the student be able to do some research so that they can explain how it's going to affect the students at the high school. I think that all has to be tied back because they are the student rep. So, but I would love to get more. These are bright kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the ratings and when they're rated. I just want to go on because I don't know. They, interested candidates write, compose an essay about why they would like to serve in such a position. They're ranked on their GPA. Okay. Students are rated and ranked on attendance as well. Attendance in the school?
Yes.
Okay. How much emphasis is put on the GPA?
More emphasis on the essay, but some emphasis on the GPA.
Okay.
More emphasis on.
While I think GPA is very important, I think that you could be losing some people because of that.
We are. There's no question. I think the way it was set up originally was to put our best foot forward and to reward some of our very best kids and have them deal with the board. I don't think, that's why I say I think the process needs to be looked at. I'm not sure they need to put that much emphasis on GPA. It ought to be on the essay. We ought to be picking kids who really have a reason to do this and want to do it for a reason. So I think the essay should be more important. And
And it doesn't have to be a high performer.
No, their school performance, their community service, some of those kind of things I think ought to be part of it. So I think the selection process could be tightened up a little bit, but what they do for the board, I think, could be expanded and could really be valuable. I've seen it work better other places.
It's a 2-year?
good.
It's 2 years.
2-year commitment. Okay.
It is in policy that it's a non-voting position, right? Because
It
there was
is a
some
non-voting.
confusion about that with one
It's a
student.
non-voting.
Yeah, that same student that.
I told him he had to get elected first.
They're not elected, they are selected, so they don't.
Because they're usually not old enough, or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but some of them get to be old enough.
I know. Okay,
I'll look at that one. All right, the last one. Policy 005, organization. Current policy addresses how the reorganization meeting is held. It addresses the election of officers, appointments, resolutions, board committees, and consultants. It is currently being followed. Our recommendations for program growth, improvement for board consideration. In order for the board to continually grow, maintain a fresh perspective, and keep all board members engaged, the president and vice president should not serve in the same positions for more than 2 consecutive years. The only exception to this would be if no other board members are willing to take on either position. Board committees. A description of the responsibilities, time required, expectations, and desired outcomes of each committee should be included in or attached to or posted on the district's website, one of them. This would help provide information for new board members so they can determine which committees they would like to volunteer on, and provide further transparency for the public as to how board members fulfill their roles and responsibilities. Again, in the interest of transparency and effectiveness, the board should consider defining, describing the roles, responsibility, and expectations of its leaders, president, vice president, and perhaps also consider the value of doing the same in a generic manner for committee chairpersons. Dr. Miller's comments.
Want me to handle my comments?
Sure,
Is it easier
go
for me?
right ahead, thank you.
I lean away from listing the names of committees in policy only because every time you put something in that could change, then you have to change the policy. I would support them putting them on the website, doing all that, because that you can change without redefining the whole policy. And I think the committee should be appointed right after reorganization. I've always felt that that's the best way to do it. As soon after reorganization as practical, with a list of charges being presented to the committee chairs. This is what the board expects. And then have the superintendent maintain a list of the committees and on the website so that you do that and point them every year on an as-needed basis. From a superintendent's perspective, and only from a superintendent's perspective, not from a board member's perspective, but I believe term limits for the president isn't a positive move. As a superintendent, I can tell you there is a benefit to having some continuity. Now, should somebody be in that position 8-10 years, that's really, you guys can elect and unelect people if that's the case. But 2, 3, 4 years is not a bad thing. It's a superintendent and board president really do work as a team, and it's an important team. And if you have that continuity and that history and that relationship between the superintendent and the board, you can move a district forward, I think, a whole lot easier than if that position is turning over too often. 2 years isn't terrible. 1 year, turning it over every year is a bad thing. 2 years, but 3 or 4 years, if you're going to put a term limit, make it a little longer than 2. That's, again, from my perspective, having been through it for almost 20 years, I can tell you. It makes a difference. It makes it easier to operate. It's tough to get to know how to do the board president's job in a year.
Well, my comment as far as the term limit is, if you have 5 to be president, you have 5 to change the policy. So to me, it's, if the president's doing a good job and everybody wants that person to be there, then they're going to be there. So,
And if not, they won't be.
Right.
I've always felt that way about term limits. So.
Yep.
I think the limit kind of, we were all elected in here to cast our votes the way we saw fit. And by setting a policy, we're kind of relinquishing our vote to a policy, but we were elected to vote, so we're kind of relinquishing that. I can tell you from having just being halfway through my second year, the first year, you don't have a clue.
No.
And by the middle of your second year, you're actually starting to get it. And I think in the policy suggestion, it said it was for a fresh perspective, and right now, I can do the board president things rotely. I don't have to think about it. So now I do have the time I can spend to go out and maybe tackle some other goals, some things that I've wanted to get done since the beginning, since I started being president. I now have the confidence to do that. So I don't, actually, I think, as Jeff suggested, by turning somebody over every 1 or 2, even 3 years, will inhibit free thinking. And I just, and, you know, by law, we have to do a reorganization on the first week of December, I guess it is. And there's no code or law that substantiates a policy for a limitation. So, and I just had a question. In some of these, you had said that you looked at other school districts for policies. Did you look at other school districts to see if any of this there were any term limits at any other district?
I did not.
Because I know it was mentioned in some, and I didn't know.
I just think it's a decision the board should make every year.
I concur. I think that it's, those two, president and vice president, they should be voted on by the board. It's one of the things the board does,
Do it every year.
Do it every year.
But I do like the idea of posting the committees on the website, and I think it's a good idea, especially in the interest of
Yeah, with a description of what the committee's charge is.
And their goals.
Remind me what happens at the reorg meeting. Do we actually, remind me what happens at the reorg meeting, at the annual reorg meeting?
Election of officers and,
Committee.
well, there's
If you
some,
choose,
there's some.
yeah.
And is that required to be done at that time?
Yes, first week of
Yes,
December.
first week in December,
And
you're
that's a
required
state
to reorganize.
requirement.
And also is when you swear in
School
new board,
code.
And-
board members.
and-
Swear in new board
Right.
members.
But I do remember being in a position, maybe some other people remembers too, one of the things you have to do is vote for people that you don't know.
Well, that's,
Day one, which is
it's,
a bit absurd.
yeah, it's a school code requirement. You have to reorganize.
One of the things I know, Joyce, that you had asked for, and this was a while ago, you had asked all the committee chair people for a description of their
We've been trying
responsibilities.
that. I'm guilty, I haven't,
I don't know if you had them or...
I think they were being sent to you, weren't they, Ken? Weren't you collecting them?
I don't know that. I mean, I don't ever remember.
I'm still working on mine.
We're going to talk to Dr. Zerby about this.
How about if
Yeah.
we send out a
Yeah,
blank,
we-
fill in the blanks?
There you go.
That would be a little bit.
We can do that, because it would be nice.
Kim, I think you did send yours out as a template.
I sent it to
Yeah, it was a
somebody.
template.
Send it to me, yeah.
Right.
Did y'all
And it's
enjoy that?
still a template,
Still a blank template.
unfortunately.
It's,
Well, part of the reason I didn't do mine is the technology committee's kind of morphed. This has got a new year for it. Like, before we met at a diner and had breakfast, that was, but now we're more organized. I think it's actually working way better, so.
Well,
but
when you do-
I think it does need to be done, and we really should try to get
You
something on paper.
mentioned it earlier, it's tedious, it's time consuming, and everybody puts it at the bottom of the list, but we really have to be more diligent about it, so.
I can tell you that some of the other districts are way more impressive in terms of their committee memberships and their pictures and when they meet. And, I mean, there are some,
More better guidelines.
there are some good websites out there that describe what they do better.
Well, I do want to thank the policy committee for this. This is a lot of work.
Yep.
And so thank you for doing that. And I think it made us address some things that we didn't really want to address, but knew we had to. So
Now
thank
we
you for
got some
that.
changes to make, huh?
Right.
Thank you to Maria.
Maria, thank you.
She led the charge. Thanks for Dr. Miller's comments.
Good job. Okay. Where's my, okay. I think we're done.
That's it.
Oh, yeah.
Other new business?
Just keeping you on track.
Thanks, it's been a long day.
Yeah, other new
Okay,
business.
so anybody else have anything to say about policies? Are we done with policies here?
Oh, I hope so.
Okay, there being none, any new business? Maria?
I'd like Dr. Miller. I just got this in the mail, the community education program.
Okay.
The Walk and Talk Club.
The
I mean-
Walk and Talk Club.
I mean, because I kind of have an issue. It says, I mean, I love it, walk and talk, okay, but you're walking the halls and stairs, so I need some background on this. You're walking the halls and stairs of Arcola and Skyview schools. Okay? All you have to do is fill out a registration form and you're going to get a badge. And it's available on school days when students are present from 4 to 7. So I want to know, anybody, any nut out there can send in a registration form and they're going to get a badge and they're going to be able to walk through the schools? So I
know nothing about this.
I would think that that's put through that, what's the name of that system, that wrapper?
They're gone.
Janine knows something
Janine
about
here,
it.
come on Janine.
Come up to the mic, dear, and tell us about the walk and talk club.
Well, we've discussed this because of security. It's a walk and talk club for exercise, for wellness.
Okay.
After 4 o'clock, the buildings, as you know, are open for the community members to come. So many people come for volleyball, for sewing, for knitting, for other activities. And this is one avenue for people can come and just walk and talk. So they do not get clearances because, again, anyone can come into the buildings after school hours. It's an open public area. So we do have registrations for them. They
Right.
do have badges that they have to wear, and we do give them a little jaunt where they can walk on the first floor, primarily in Arcola and Skyview.
We don't give them a map, do we?
No, we just say, this is where you can
Just
walk.
mark a route
This is
for
the
them.
door you can come in, so they know the door they can go into. The custodians know the doors that they leave open for them. It's the same door that's open for everybody else that comes in after school hours.
So it's like
So they
walking
don't
the mall.
have access.
Yes,
They
absolutely.
don't have access to the schoolrooms or
No.
No, the
students that
schoolroom
are
No.
would be locked.
When we say when school is present, so we want to say on in-service days, it's not available, holidays,
when
it's
school
not
is
available,
open.
weekends, it's
Okay,
not
So the
available.
students are out of school. And they-
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, because I know, I had a friend who told me, she came for one of these walk things, and nobody stopped her, nobody told her anything. She kind of just like walked in the school, and there were kids there the day that she went.
And there probably will be
Well, there'll
people
probably be
leaving
some
for the
athletes.
sports,
Yeah. Might see some
drama,
athletes.
after-school
Okay.
activities.
I just get, nervous. Today, there was another guy, nut.
I read that too.
With a
I
gun,
know.
thank God, he didn't kill anybody. But it kind of scares me. I'm thinking anybody can walk in, I got a gun, I'll hide it in the bathroom, tomorrow I'll come back and get it.
And that's a
so-
constant discussion we have because we are a community open to the public in the evening.
Once school is out and students go home, our buildings are
As long as
used
they're,
by lots of people.
Thanks, Janine.
thanks, Janine.
Can I ask
other-
one question? The schedules for our students, when are the seniors getting are the high school students getting theirs? Because it sounds like middle school's got theirs, but I would think high school should be first, but they don't have
Well,
it.
not always. Is Judy here?
No, but Jamie is. We got a phone call into Sapphire today because there was a slight
Yeah,
problem.
get up to the microphone because we can't.
Hi, there was a slight problem with Sapphire, the program that we're using, and a phone call was made to them yesterday. For some reason, our study halls were filling with students when they were in lunch. Sapphire said it was an anomaly and they had to look at it, and they hope to have an answer to us tomorrow. Judy had said that by Friday, one way or another, we have to go live with them so that the students can see them. Any sort of issues with scheduling will be based on a grade-by-grade basis, with seniors given the most priority, so that appointments can be made so that students can, have their schedules fixed and addressed.
Thank you, Janine.
Welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
I think I have a question. I'm sitting here thinking about this policy stuff, and I'm not sure, now they're on there for a first read, but we have no real, it's not like we have
Yeah.
wording changes.
We don't have
We have-
wording yet, so there'll be nothing to read. We'll just leave them on first read until we get some changes. So they'll
Okay.
be on first read for a couple
Like a
meetings.
second first read.
Yeah, it'll be
So-
a second first read.
So from the minutes, I guess, of this meeting, and the policy committee goes forward with
Making
whatever.
some changes, yes. And
And
then we'll have them on for first reading again.
Okay, so for example, the student representative one. Now, is that something that you set up? Is that something that, how do you want to?
Well, I think we can move ahead. I'll talk to Julie about the selection process. I think we can move ahead with that. Once we get people selected, then we can talk about sitting down with them and talking about how we might want to expand their role a little bit throughout the year. I don't know that we need to lay that on them right in September. We could-
But I'll tell you, when I was reading this, I thought about program objectives. And, I mean, it could be that one of the program objectives is or was that we were rewarding good, you know, academic achievement, whatever. So I guess, you know, when we talk about what is the purpose, what is the objective,
Well, and
there's a couple
it-
of things.
it may take us a little time, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, it may take us a little time to get through this and get through the first year and then change the whole selection process maybe in the future, so it may take a little time.
Yeah, the broadcasting, we could probably approve at a first meeting next week.
I think you're right.
All we wanted to do was
That was
just add.
That's an easy one. Yeah, maybe you can take a look through these and see, and
That
there
one,
may be some.
that one I could probably
definitely.
change the language
Yeah.
and get that one done
Yeah.
right away.
And get it started. right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Any other new business? Okay, courtesy of the floor. Candy.
Candy Alaba, Eagleville. I'd like to, Kim and Maria work very hard on the policy committee. We do go to the meetings at 9 o'clock in the morning. They do have, if it wasn't for us, they would be there all by themselves. They do work very hard. They take their time. They talk it out. They do accept input from any member of the public that's sitting there. I was pleased to see with the broadcasting policy, the only thing is you have in there that the DVDs to be destroyed after 30 days. Well, they're not destroyed. That needs to be taken out, because if I request a DVD from last year, that at maybe one of the meetings that I could not make in the spring, if you deny me, I can appeal to the Right to Know office, and most likely it'll side with me. So, and I mean, I know the argument was, you know, space and storage, well, they have these little plugs they stick in a computer, whatever they call them. So that you might want to look at, but I think they do a very good job on the policy committee. Even if it is 9 o'clock in the morning, because we've been there for a while. If they had it at night, it would be a very long night. They would be very tired, and I don't think the public would stay that late. But another question I have, which pertains to property committee, and I'm not picking on you, Stuart. I saw on the website that you're auctioning off 2 minibuses and a big stack of toner. My question is, that was never discussed at a property committee meeting, and no board action was taken on, it wasn't voted on, where a month or so ago, you had to vote on selling 2 vehicles for $100. So I think this needs to be discussed by the board. The toner, I think that's very expensive, the stack that's there. I would think maybe sell it back to the company or call around to different school districts and sell to them at cost. But that's a lot of money, and it's taxpayers' money. And if for the buses, maybe, I don't know exactly what's wrong with them, maybe, I know the engine doesn't work, scrap it, sell it for parts, some school districts might need parts from it, but I was just curious because this hasn't been discussed publicly, so, thank you.
Is it on Swift agenda?
Yeah. Well, no, they approved us using, you approved us using eBay to dispose of this stuff.
Board policy states that any decision to dispose of surplus equipment goes to the superintendent.
Right.
It doesn't need board action.
Correct.
No.
Okay, any other, Mr. Andrews?
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I have a written statement to read, and I don't think I can do it in 2 minutes, but certainly less than 4.
Okay, why don't you start?
See how far you
Well, you know.
Read fast, that's all.
And it's entitled Death by Democracy. And it's about government, and it's also about the public. In an article published in newspapers across the country earlier this month, George Will spoke to the bankruptcy of Detroit. I think we've all read about that or heard about it. Now, I hope that in Methacton, we're not going down a similar path, or in other school districts. Mr. Will described this insect species called ichneumon. It deposits an egg in the caterpillar. The result is a hungry larvae. The larvae proceeds to eat all but the vital organs and intestines. Among Detroit's problems are its 47 public unions that are now highly at risk of losing much of their retirees' pensions. Similarly, Peasers has huge problems here. On May 21st at this podium, or at the LGI, Mrs. Kernoff, MEA co-president, spoke to you claiming to understand your desperate economic position relating to that night's budget vote. She asked why our legislatures cut $800 million of stimulus from education. She suggested you give them ideas such as taxing Marcellus shale gas and raising the PA sales tax. No mention of any labor rate or benefit as being too generous. Perhaps she has the mindset of the larvae. Public discussion is rife with comment on onerous property taxes. Auto companies moved some operations from Detroit, and their workers moved outside the city because of taxes. Similarly here, Visteon had a 1,000-worker factory and closed it. For the Detroit, the feds will not bail them out, and neither will the state. They are on their own in bankruptcy court. Could that happen here or some other school district or some municipality? Maybe. I've already told you that home foreclosures here are 50% higher than in the nearby Upper Merion district. Mr. Will questions liberalism, the viability of democracy, where government and unions collaborate in pillaging taxpayers, and he states self-government has failed. I discuss only some of his strong message due to time restrictions. On another subject, totally different, education should be for the students. Here there's a long-standing impasse, per the high school website, as to whether there will be a change from 7 to 8 periods, a subject yet to be discussed in public. Probably both sides can and should compromise this month, and there should be a board vote on this policy issue. Finally, I'm a voter and taxpayer here and active for good education. I resent Mr. Jones stating he doesn't work for the taxpayers, Mr. Roth recently stating he does not pander to the voters, and Mr. Nascimento laughing as he said to me last month, "Don't trip over the dead horse."
Thank you. Any other comments this evening? Mary Jane.
Now, did you time yourself?
No, I did not.
When you, 3 minutes.
You have to walk through the gates.
Hi, Mary Jane Barbone, Eagleville. Just a couple comments on your policies. Having been in your shoes and with some of the policies that are under review, I know Joyce kind of relayed a situation that she had experienced with the censure committee. I know the one that I had that I think Dr. Miller referenced from 2006 was very involved. A lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of hours, and as some people set up here at the table, with really no consequence. And I know after we went through it, we kind of vowed that the next time the policies were all under review, that we would probably eliminate it. So I just wanted to give you that comment. And the other one for term limits on officers, and I'm not sure if I missed it or not, but if it's on committees as well, my opinion would also be, I think it's a good idea as a board member to get different opportunities at different committees. So to have kind of term limits on committee assignments, I think would be a good thing to consider. We always thought it would be good to have board members maybe be outside of their comfort zone and do some things that that they may not have normally done to become a better board member. So keep that as a consideration as well. The other thing that I just was reading here as I was sitting back there, the work session, you have a description here that says that you will have your agenda for items that you vote for the next week. And I know I haven't been a regular attendee since I left the board, but I've never seen really, like for the past year, an agenda that had the items you're going to vote for the next week. So I was just wondering if you might want to reword that, because I know your format's a little bit different, which is very good, but it does say here that you'll have the agenda for action items for the next week. So you might want to consider either rewording that or providing an agenda the week before. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm not exactly sure what you're saying to me. Any other comments? There being none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. O'Neill, second. Mrs. Barone, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. 8-0. Good evening. Thank you for coming out.